What I'd like to talk to you about is how do you make a difference in the world? Big topic, principles are pretty basic. And the principles are these. Have a passion in your guts and know what practically you must do about it and then go and do it. It's not rocket science, but from little things, big things grow. And you do change the world. Brick by brick, step by step, building by building, house by house, school bag by school bag. There is a great problem, I think, across much of the world today, which is this sense of malaise. That it's all too big, it's all too hard, it's all too difficult, and we can do nothing. What I'd like you to take away from this evening is simply one undiluted message, which is that is absolute. I don't swear. Well, unless you've seen the YouTube. That is absolute nonsense. Fine Anglo-Saxon word. Like the one on YouTube. Because you can. You're smart people. The reason you're here is you've got a heart. And you therefore get behind stuff that works. Our mate here, come on over here. He of dulcet tones and no microphone, that fella. He mentioned Haiti and Port-au-Prince. Here's a little thing about Australia. Haiti is not in our daily national conversation. You might say that's natural, it's the other side of the world, a different hemisphere. There are 192 member states of the United Nations. Haiti is one of them. And basically the view is it's someone else's problem. End of the earthquake. Well, it's at that point that you discover, as John Donne did several centuries ago, that no man or woman is an island. We're all connected. And we are all challenged and impoverished by the death or suffering of someone else in the human family, whatever the part of the planet they come from, including Haiti. And so we received, through the international community, representations about what we were going to do about the earthquake in Haiti. This is some years ago now. My response then, I think I had a different job, I was Prime Minister. And I've been on work experience since then. My attitude then was, it's an emergency humanitarian crisis, doesn't matter what part of the world it is, we have a common and global responsibility. And so we did. We were not the largest contributors. I remember, I think we contributed some $35, $36 million. What stunned me though was two things. One is you had Australian NGOs realising that this was part of their common humanitarian challenge as well, and they were in there doing things, Schoolbag and others. The second was this. That September I was at the UN in New York, and I was invited to the meeting of the international committee supporting the Haiti Reconstruction and Emergency Assistance Program. It was chaired by Bill Clinton and co-chaired by the then President of Haiti. And so this is not a gathering that we're normally at, but I went. And what surprised me was the opening remarks by Bill Clinton, when he said, "I'd like to begin by acknowledging the contribution of the Government of Australia." And I immediately thought, God, have we given that much money? No, his principle was actually quite interesting, as he went on to explain. He said, because the Government of Australia has committed $36 million, and they've paid $36 million. A lot of people talk big and don't follow through. One of the things I've tried to say in the international community in recent years, that as Australians we have our imperfections, but what we say we seek to do. And we do. It's like you guys, the Schoolbag. And so that's our little, and some would say slightly larger, story about Haiti. Let me tell you another story about the President of Liberia, who you've also mentioned this evening. She's a fantastic woman. I last saw her about 5 or 6 months ago in London. I was then as Foreign Minister, part of my rolling work experience program. You have to censor this one, it's all right.
I think I know a few here.
It was all off the record. Anyway, and crazily I'd agreed to do this. To go to, with Bill Gates and others, the global launch of the global Gavi appeal, the Global Alliance on Vaccines and Immunisation. Hands up who knows what it is? Okay, let me tell you what it is. Gavi is one of the best NGOs operating in the world. It involves corporates, it involves community organisations, it involves local governments, but the key challenge is this. It is how do we most effectively deliver vaccines to developing countries against the 5 most prevalent and lethal diseases for kids under the age of 5 through a vaccination program led by what are called pentavalents. And all I know, given I'm not a person of science, is that penta has something to do with 5. So they wanted me to go to this thing, but it was a bit like the Haiti experience. I mean, the big donors are the British and others. But they wanted me to go, and so I literally flew to London one night and flew back to Australia the next day. And we made a contribution from memory of about 220 million Australian dollars. By the way, that's your taxes at work, and through that, 7.7 million kids will live. Not a bad outcome. 7.7 million kids will live around the world. But as I discovered, our role that evening, apart from providing the usual Australian comic entertainment at the beginning of the show, because you had, it was in London, you're the visiting Australian, so you copy the usual forms of ritualistic humour and abuse, and which we returned several fold to our British hosts. But the result was the whole fund was oversubscribed. They were seeking to raise something in the vicinity of, I think, 1.2, and they raised 1.6 billion that evening. And the result is, if you want to see one Millennium Development Goal where we have some prospect of making a huge impression, it is what we're doing to reduce infant mortality around the world, largely through the vehicle of vaccination programs. It's fantastic what these guys are doing. And we Australians are in there. I think we're now among their 5 largest donors in the world. A few years back, we were one of their non-donors in the world. And again, that's a story about your taxes at work through an Australian government which believes in these things. Which brings me on to the third part of my story this evening, which is Timor-Leste. Well, you often hear from people who think that it's not a smart thing to do to give foreign aid, that, and I quote, charity begins at home, unquote. Well, if Timor-Leste is not basically near to home, I don't know what is. It's just up the road, for God's sake. It's just up past Yamundi. I grew up in Yamundi, I can talk about it. So there you have a country with a population of just over 1 million people. But if you look at it carefully, against most measures in the Millennium Development Goals, this is one of the poorest countries in the world. I was horrified as Foreign Minister to discover what the malnutrition rates are still today in Timor-Leste. This is a country next door to us. It should not be the case. So let me tell you another little story of encouragement. What we've done through the Australian Aid Program for some years now is fund a program called Seeds for Life. You might say, what's that? Well, most of Timor-Leste is agricultural. Most of the population don't live in Dili, they live out in the bush. And if you've been out in the bush in Timor-Leste, it's inaccessible, most of it. The roads are still good. Seeds for Life is simply this, that through the Australian Council for International Agricultural Research, which falls within the Foreign Minister's portfolio, that what we do is get the brightest, brainiest, nerdiest agricultural scientists that you can find. Super nerds.
Genetically modified.
I'm paid for the International Society of Nerds. I understand these things. Nerds are okay. I won't say they're cool, but that's okay. So you get this team of super smart ag scientists who are good at this one thing. How do I match this soil type with seed types in the 5 staples grown in this area to maximally increase their local harvest, to bring it beyond sub-subsistence levels to adequate nutrition? And so over a 4-year program, we have done this in 5 major food types from memory, cassava and corn and potatoes and 2 others that I've forgotten. And the result is, after all that work, we've increased the yield on a given plot of land with no fertiliser, no additional inputs, no additional water. We increased the yield, the harvest yield from a set plot of land from between 50 and 150%. And through the AID program, providing farmers for the first time with storage vats, which enable them to actually store properly surplus produce for when they're not producing. Result, nutritional levels which actually sustain the kids without the obvious signs of malnutrition emerging, which has been the case for decades and decades and decades. That program has now finished its trial stage. I went and saw it in a little place called Maliana, which you may have been to yourself, not far from the border of West Timor. And they intend to take that set of seed science and soil science out to the rest of East Timor during the course of this year. So what's the mission statement? How do we provide credible agricultural and nutritional self-sufficiency to the rural populations of one of our nearest neighbours? So there are some good things happening up there, but this makes it better, what you're doing with school bags. The kids are still not only malnourished, but dirt poor. As a consequence of that, marginal, minimal, and in some cases non-existent educational opportunities. So the fact that you're providing this year as your target, providing school bags this year to your target country, Timor-Leste, I think is a terrific thing. I'm told that your previous target countries have been Haiti, obviously, and in addition, South Africa. These are good places to work. But the moral of the story is pretty simple. You can make a difference. And when you see the face of someone to whom you have made a difference and realise it ain't just a bunch of stats, but these are real live human beings with potential and opportunities and aspirations for life just like you and just like you and just like you, it really completes us as human beings to do that. My final story is about one of the best things I did as Foreign Minister, which was when the famine hit in the Horn of Africa. This is a really ugly part of the world in terms of natural disasters. Some of you who are old enough will remember the famine in Somalia 25 years ago. Most of you will not, because you wouldn't have been born. But I won't dwell on that fact. You and I can reminisce about it. But as the data rolled in and it was getting uglier and uglier, the World Food Programme, the International Council of the Red Cross and others got on the phone and said, Kevin, we have a big problem. And so we responded, and we responded strongly, because they needed product champions in the world who took this seriously and were prepared to commit sizable dollars to it. And so this is not the biggest country in the world against the economic measures, with the 13th largest economy in the world, but we rapidly became the 3rd largest donor to Somalia. And the mission was very clear, to leverage others to get in there and do their bit. And so we did. Then we went to the general Australian community and part of the Dollar for Dollar campaign, which you may recall, through which we raised, I'm looking for some staff here present, I think we raised some $26 million additionally from the Australian community. That is, whatever single dollar put in by the Australian public, we, the Australian government, matched with another dollar. So the overall aid effort into the Horn of Africa involving Somalia, Ethiopia, Djibouti, as well as parts of Kenya bordering Somalia, was huge. I went there to a camp inside Somalia called, I think, not Jobo, that's down another part of the country heading into Kenya. This one is just inside the Somali border. The name is not material now. But we arrived there, and they were just setting up the relief facilities, as streams of people were coming in from across the desert and from across the worst famine-hit parts of Somalia. And they were queuing, and they had kids in their arms, and they'd been walking for days and weeks, and little ones in particular were expiring in front of you, or close to it. And so the head of the World Food Programme, a wonderful woman by the name of Josette Sheeran, an American, we literally, neither of us having the qualifications, went down line after line of these people lining up to find those kids who were about to die, and shuffle them to, at that stage, a hidden UNICEF feeding station because we didn't want it stampeded by people. 3 months later, I was sent back a photograph of this little boy who we had taken there, who was literally on death's door. And 3 months later, bouncing, beautiful baby boy Yusuf, whose life has radically changed because he survived because of the generosity of the Australian taxpayer. And those stories are being told right around the world. And this is part of the story. Governments can do so much. What you do in the community is just as critical. Your dollars count, your passion counts, your vote counts, your political agitation counts, but what you do on the ground also counts. So with those few remarks, let me officially declare open this particular school bag and all those who will dive into it in Timor-Leste in the days, weeks and months ahead. Thank you.